Now, there's some weapons in Hypixel Skyblock that have been great ever since they've been introduced. You know, revolutionary weapons that are really quite hard to replicate. But that can't be said for everything. The Midas Staff is a weapon that's always forever been in the Hyperion shadow, but over the years, because of its unique style, has had some very, very prominent uses. But before we get into it, I want to ask you a question. How many of you guys actually use a Midas Staff nowadays? Because I feel like the amount of people using it is just slowly decreasing and decreasing. Now, for those of you who aren't maybe aware of the power of the Midas Staff or the potential power, this is not a good Midas Staff. It's just a random one that I have in the museum. It's not got good enchantments on it. It's not even recombobulated. It only has 33 million coins paid for it, which basically in turn affects the damage that it deals. So by all stretch of the imagination, this is not a good Midas Staff. However, our one-hit damage is 4.7 million. And when we compare that to a Chimera 5 Hyperion, it's way, way, way better in terms of one-hit damage. So I'm sure you can only imagine if this was a good Midas Staff and I wasn't a bozo and had ultimate wise on a Hyperion like everybody else. And the Midas Staff's problems emerge with its cooldown. With a 1 second cooldown in between usage, its damage per second is not really comparable to something like a Hyperion, where you can spam it multiple times before you've then maybe gone ahead and used the Midas Staff. And for the most part, the Midas Staff is a great weapon, but forever in the Hyperion shadow. Now, on this Iron Man profile that I have, we have 4 or 5 Midas Staffs. For the progression of everything else, it kind of makes little sense. You see, the Midas Staff back then was pretty much as good as you're going to get without a Hyperion, you know. The Midas Staff was really, really powerful for multiple reasons because it has multiple uses. But what happened to this weapon? And why is it not really very usable anymore? We'll get into that in just a moment. If you are planning on purchasing anything from the Hypixel store, make sure to use code NITROS as it gets yourself 5% off. If you watch the videos and you haven't subscribed to the channel, please make sure to do so. You should join the Discord server, it's linked in the description of this video. We offer Slayers and Dungeon carries, so if you need carries or want to carry and make some coins, make sure to join. Now, a very, very prominent usage for the Midas Staff back in the day was actually E-Man Slayer. And while the Midas Staff can still damage Endermen nowadays, it's not like you just can't damage them. It was actually down to the Crimson Armor change that made this weapon not really viable for Enderman Slayer. You see, way back when, the Crimson Armor swipe was actually applicable on weapons that dealt magical damage, which meant that weapons that deal magical damage, you know, a Hyperion, a Spirit Scepter, a Midas Staff, would benefit from that swipe, dealing a humongous amount of damage. You already know how much damage this weapon could potentially do. Imagine double hitting. Of course, now if we change into our Crimson, we deal 2.2 million damage, but we only actually gain stacks when we hit with a melee weapon. And even if we have 10 stacks with a melee weapon, and try to use our Midas Staff, we don't benefit from the swipe. So the death of Crimson Mage, the E-Man Slayer, was also the partial death of the Midas Staff. But that wasn't really all for the Midas Staff shortcomings. One of the other main reasons that I actually got a Midas Staff on my Iron Man profile, which took ages to grind the coins for back in the day, it was actually to do Diana. Now it seems just too fitting that we've just had a Diana update in Diana and everyone's been enjoying it, you know, Chimera down to 45 mil at one point, to be talking about Diana again. But quite simply, those mythological mobs don't take magical damage anymore. So this weapon is completely useless when it comes to Diana. It wasn't, because back in the day it was really good. Because of, you know, the really high one-hit damage you could do, you could take care of, you know, a lot of the mobs that you might not have been able to deal with pretty easily. You know, I'm not saying things like that, those changes are bad for the game. I think if anything, they may be good because you're then kind of doing the activity as it was more intended to be done. Giving more usages to actual melee weapons, so on. But there's another major flaw with the Midas Staff. I mentioned before that it has a 1 second cooldown in between usages, which is really annoying. The fact that I actually have a 225 mana cost with Ultimate Wise 5 on the weapon means that it does have pretty high base mana cost, but that doesn't really matter because you can never spam it. But the usability of this weapon is just not good at all. I'm going to test it out for a few different applications. But first of all, I'm going to say what it is good for. Now, I found that when I was grinding these magma cubes on my Iron Man profile, that the Midas Staff was pretty good, because I couldn't deal the damage that I needed to kill them relatively quickly with an alternative mage weapon like a Spirit Scepter. Whereas the Midas Staff took care of them really easily. Great. How about something like a mini boss? Let's try a Blade Soul. Okay, so let's just see what it's like. Dealing 1.2 million damage per hit. And by all means it works. But it's slow. It's clunky. It doesn't feel fluent. You know, I just think I'd be better off using something like a Spirit Scepter. Genuinely, I think I might kill it quicker. Like, it's actually healing before I can deal enough damage. And sure, this isn't a great Midas Staff, and I'd probably be able to, if I had a good one, deal probably close to 2 million damage per hit with stuff. And maybe I'd be able to get a bit closer to killing it, but this is just miserable. Right, well, let's test it in dungeons, and I can already tell you it's just not good. But that's because its clearing capabilities are really, really not good. Its damage is great, you know, 23 million. Bearing in mind I'm on my Iron Man profile right now. I think I'm at a 30. Don't have great gear. Still deal a ton of damage. And for things like mini-bosses, sure, you know, brilliant. But for what you actually need it for majority of the dungeon, you are so much better off with something like a Spirit Scepter, you know? And I guess you can't expect every weapon to be great at everything. That makes no sense, or else it would just be, you know, the only weapon that everyone would have. But its real usability in dungeons is kind of lacking. It just kind of feels like everything that the Midas Staff had going for it has been completely and utterly smited. But honestly, there's more. There's more bad news for the Midas Staff. The cheapest Midas Staff on the market is 250 million coins. And for pretty much as good as you can get, a fully upgraded, I say fully upgraded, it's maxed. It's got 500 million coins paid for it, and it's a Midas Staff that could benefit from 500 million being paid for it too, which is key. This weapon is 500 million coins. 500 mil. And you've got to think to yourself, for 500 million coins, really justify this weapon. Because who's the kind of person who's going to buy this weapon? The kind of person that is going to use this weapon probably in tandem with another mage weapon. And probably mainly only for dungeons nowadays. Is it really worth buying this weapon for 500 mil? Considering a fully scrolled Hyperion is 1.3 million coins. You know, back in the day, Hyperions were almost 2 billion coins and Midas Staffs were 250, 300 mil. There's a much greater difference and it becomes much more justifiable, especially when it had many more uses. But when you actually look at these two now, the disparity in price is not crazy. And while its one-hit damage is crazy good, its damage per second is nowhere near that of a Hyperion. And even if you can get close, the usability is just not there. Yeah, I don't just want to make this a comparison video between the Hyperion and the Midas Staff because everybody knows the differences. The usability of this Midas Staff has been slashed so much that it's just hard to see who's buying it and using it. Considering it still is a very powerful weapon, but was a widely used weapon and a good budget alternative, sort of building up to a Hyperion, I'm just not sure whether I see it anymore. Anyway, that's going to be all for today. Let me know what you think in the comments. What do you think of the Midas Staff nowadays? Do you still use it? Can you think of any other proper uses for it other than just trying to basically kill high health, one-hit mobs? That just mainly ends up being in dungeons. Anyway, if you did enjoy today's video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one.